1:32 a.m. Another book finished, another opportunity to ignore my 100 plus TBR like a trad wife ignoring their improbably large quantities of children trying to get knocked up again. I set upon YouTube like a Christian wife looking for seed, hoping to find my next exciting read. I scour and peruse, something science fiction strikes my fancy.
Wait.
When all of a sudden,
What is that?
I see it. Uh-oh. I watched a YouTube video that I didn't really like about a topic that I love. Science fiction. Are we losing the essence of science fiction is a video by Darrel of Sci-Fi Odyssey, and its existence confuses me.
Boy, come back here. You're supposed to be in my shot. I start recording and you move? Don't be a piece of shit.
It seems to gatekeep in the same tired old ways that have been done for the past 50 years, that questions the sanctity of science fiction in the face of new styles and approaches. It has the unsettling undertone that real science fiction, that means hard science fiction, is being dumbed down by the continual growth and popularity of soft science fiction and speculative fiction. That it is losing what made it great, that focus on the sciences, but only the hard sciences, not the soft sciences. Or even being replaced entirely by general speculative fiction. It's like the Great Replacement Theory, but for nerds. We're under my desk in this take because I'm having what some scientists might call mental health problems. See, I was quite surprised to hear this sentiment from D-Money because while I'm not a regular watcher by any means, I've quite enjoyed a few of his videos for the details and the complete histories that he seems to provide. However, this video really feels like it's been written by a different person. See, the usual research and documentation appears to be replaced almost entirely by opinion, misinformation, extremely cherry-picked examples, and the same tired and toxic claims that I see all too often, that I feel in my soul that I must correct. Intentional or not, there is a sinister undertone of sorts that, reading the comments, I am not the only one who's picking up on it. I say this not to do a cancel culture, or to prove that I know more about the genre, because I'm 1,000,000% sure that he is more well-read than I am. But to talk about the dangers of this real versus hard versus soft versus speculative phenomena and how dangerous it is. I also want to talk about what I love about the genre, and perhaps maybe, just maybe, offer the D-Man a bit of insight as to how he can better channel these feelings of alienation for the genre. Goblin, shot ruiner, goblin. To quote Big D on what I feel like is a really good summary of his video's thesis.
As narratives lean more into socio-political commentary and intricate character development, which are all important, the core elements of speculative technology, space exploration and cosmic wonder seem to be relegated to the background. This shift prompts the question, are we witnessing an evolution in the genre, or is the essence of sci-fi being diluted in favour of broader, more accessible themes? As the boundary between sci-fi and speculative fiction becomes increasingly blurred, you couldn't be blamed for asking whether the Hugo Awards still uphold the same tenets of sci-fi that once guided its legacy.
Now, there's a bunch of questionable things in there that I will get to, but this is the perfect starting off point to get to the first big misconception that a lot of people have, and that is about the Hugo Awards.
I think it's dangerous to assume that whatever we've been doing, we're going to keep doing that. You know, the future is more of the same, only more advanced.
Now, a rather common misconception about the Hugos, which the D-Man echoes, is that they only ever nominate and vote for science fiction books, or always been about hard science fiction. If you haul your little tushy over to the Hugo website, there are 2 sections in the FAQ that say that they not only allow fantasy, but basically any kind of speculative fiction. This is a claim that I'm always legitimately surprised to see people make because it takes like 5 seconds to just disprove. And if for some reason you don't believe little ol' me, just go check the past winners. I mean, just off the top of my head, just kidding, this is heavily scripted. American Gods, Left Hand of Darkness, Harry Potter, Hyperion, Case of Conscience, Paladin of Light, all of those won throughout the history of the awards. And some of them are decidedly not real sci-fi due to having mixed blood or less of a focus on tech. And some are not even sci-fi at all. Are you eating my things? I'm gonna eat you. Also, it's not like there's some kind of sacred council that guards the sacred tenet of science fiction within the Hugo Awards. Any dingus with, according to next year's website, €45, that's 48.35 freedom dollars, in case you're wondering, can just buy a membership to Worldcon and cast their vote. Exactly like they did in 1958, where Case of Conscience won. Supposedly when there was a golden age of hard sci-fi everywhere. That's very amusing considering the emphasis on science having to be super sciencey, when the book put about as much effort into its scientific rigor as I did trying to pass chemistry class in high school. I'm not shitting on Case of Conscience, by the way. I love it. It's amazing. I'm just saying. Did there used to be a preference for real, hard science fiction? Absolutely. Was that what gave the genre its kick in the pants to get out of its pulpy past? Also, absolutely. But an important note is that the only reason it went in that direction because it was purposefully steered that way by people like John W. Campbell. And speaking of Campbell, now is the perfect time to talk about the man who is almost single-handedly responsible for turning science fiction from pulpy, horny entertainment for men into more serious, science-focused, horny entertainment for men.
It's not, I never did think much about the future. I'm only interested really in the present and the past. Who knows what the future is? Milan Kundera says, who knows? It's not there. We don't know what it is. The future in science fiction is just a metaphor for now, you know.
Campbell was an amazing editor. He knew how to provide feedback. He knew what made a good, compelling story. But a lot of that was beholden to specifically what he wanted to see in those stories. He had a vision. And that vision, whether you like it or not, was very white, very sexist, very human supremacist, and had a very colonialist view of space exploration. He told Judith Merrill that women can't write SF. He turned down Sam Delaney's novel Nova because it had a black protagonist, and he very reasonably asked Jewish authors to change their Jewish-sounding names. What's your opinion on women? Controversial, but brave. I've seen people say that people in the Golden Age wrote science fiction that was more optimistic than we get now, or post that era. After that, it became darker and grittier. Why do you think that is? Campbell and his generation were one fascinated by space and were the blessed recipient of multiple technologic and economic booms during and post World War II. That was the broad core of their optimism. However, after that faded, that's when the new wave came in and things became darker and grittier. I swear to God, if you fucked up my audio take, I am going to throw you through the window. That's where so much of their optimism came from. But after that faded, the new wave kicked in, and that's why it became darker and grittier. Because they actually started to acknowledge real issues that humanity was dealing with. Oh, and by the way, Campbell made very similar exclamations to what we're hearing today about the state and direction of science fiction. Quote, "I hope that when the new wave has deposited its froth and receded, the vast and solid shore of science fiction will appear once more. Sound familiar?
This shift prompts the question, are we witnessing an evolution in the genre, or is the essence of sci-fi being diluted in favour of broader, more accessible themes?
Random side note, the new wave is not mentioned a single time throughout this video. There is continual reverence given to the founding principles that the genre, I'm gonna fucking shit in your mouth. As I was trying to say, for some reason the new wave isn't mentioned a single time in this whole video. For some reason there is a continual reverence given to the ethos that science must be first.
The sanctity of science in science fiction is a somewhat sensitive topic, particularly among longtime fans of the genre. Many are increasingly disheartened by what they perceive as a dilution of the rigorous scientific foundations that once defined sci-fi. I can understand how the essence and core intellectual rigour of the genre seem to be getting overshadowed, even compromised by the influx of broader, sometimes even shallow or tangential themes.
And then everything else after it is framed as though it's straying from the path or breaking those sacred founding tenets. Some of the most important works ever from the genre came out of the post-Golden Age New Wave era, where they intentionally toned down the science mumbo-jumbo in order to focus on the humanity of the things and topics and themes that we're being engaged with. And it sure feels mighty convenient to just kind of leave this out. Am I saying that optimistic sci-fi is bad? Absolutely not. Becky Chambers is one of my favorite working authors today. But there's a difference between straight up ignoring real-world systemic problems in favor of your techno-colonial fantasies versus addressing them in a hopeful and complex way. To quote Steve Davidson, the current editor of the Amazing Stories magazine, Campbell shaped the genre in his magazine in a particular way, one that reflected his own beliefs and goals and repressed the development of large segments of the field at the same time. This was his vision. One of the most tangible examples of this vision that was shared by Campbell and others at the time shows up in the essay Racism in Science Fiction by big man Sam Delaney himself. He recounts his experience at the 1968 Nebula Awards, where his novel The Einstein Intersection won Best Novel. My novel won, and the presentation of the glittering Lucite Trophy was followed by a discomforting speech from an eminent member of the SFWA. Perhaps you've heard such disgruntled talks. Perhaps. They begin, as did this one, "What I have to say tonight, many of you are not going to like," and went on to castigate the organization for letting itself be taken in by pretentious literary nonsense, unto granting it awards and abandoning the old values of good, solid, craftsmanlike storytelling. An odd experience, I must tell you, to accept an award from a hall full of people in tuxedos and evening gowns, and then, from the same podium which you accepted it, hear a half-hour Jeremiad from an eminence grise declaring that award to be worthless, and the people who voted it to you duped fools. Don't worry, we're coming back to this later. However you view the works, that was his vision. An American-centric, science-first, inclusivity-last viewpoint. He absolutely brought forth some incredible writers and incredible works that will stand the test of time. But it's also incredibly important to remember that this landscape was also one that was very hostile to women, to people of color, and to basically anybody who kind of didn't share his human superiority complex. And that influence is still felt, past and present. Many women and people of color are shoved into soft science fiction because they aren't sciencey enough. It's the same long-standing real-world issue of hard science nerds demeaning soft science nerds because they're not doing real science. You're both nerds. Just get along. One of the great instances of this boiling over was the infamous Sad Puppies event, which is, goodness me, close to a decade ago now. In summary, the Sad Puppies were a group of politically conservative, sad gatekeeping losers who tried to rig the Hugos in their favor. They took advantage of the Hugo's voting system in order to get a bunch of things that they wanted to win, that they deemed science fiction, because it had become flooded with, quote, social justice agitators. Does that wording sound familiar? Because it should. I don't need to go over the whole thing, but if you want a really good recap, I'm linking a Vox article that really captures the sheer autism of the whole debacle. The undertones, and sometimes the overtones, that I have spoken of what this gatekeeping signifies as the core problem, is a completely fantastical issue that regularly rears its head in ways like this. And I hate to say it, but D-Money's video is one of the most recent examples.
And I see my job as one who tries to view what Faulkner said. What I write is the study of the human heart in conflict with itself, which is the only thing worth writing about. It's the only thing worth the blood and the sweat of the act.
Okay, back to the video. I mention these things because in Darrel's video, and I don't know if it's coincidence or what, but every book used as an example of contemporary sci-fi being diluted is one written by a woman with a more prominent focus on societal issues, oppression, and gender dynamics. And then all the good examples of sci-fi are written by men. And look, I just gotta say it, I gotta have my little gatekeeping moment here. I think there are such better choices to pick for good modern science fiction than Project Hail Mary and Three Body Problem. They are some of the absolute poster children for prioritizing a bunch of science garbage over actual characterization and a legitimately compelling story. There's just no tension. There's just no tension. And the aliens in Three Body Problem, they're boring. They suck. Okay? I'm just gonna say it. I'm just gonna say it. I'm being that guy. I don't get the Project Hail Mary Three Body Problem love. Maybe my brain is broken. I don't know, but I thought they were a little bit poopy. If I was making a gatekeeping science fiction video with questionable undertones, I would have picked contemporary examples like Blind Sight by Peter Watts, or the Children of Time books, or House of Suns, or the Zones of Thought series. I mean, Project Hail Mary? Really? Guy alert. Guy alert. Guy alert. Wee woo, guy alert. Tangent over. Anyways, it feels a little bit extra weird because some of the examples of good science fiction don't really feel like they should kind of be there based off of previous complaints. In the case of Dune, Herbert specifically wrote it to not have focus on the technological elements, to purposefully engage with the societal and oppression issues that the book is trying to deal with. It's fundamentally a commentary on the whole white savior dynamic. It intentionally has very little emphasis on scientific rigor, and also space drugs that are giant worm poop which let you see through space and time. And Neuromancer, oh my god, like it is undefinable. It is like a fantasy book written in cyberspace. It is poetry. In the themes, there's so much focus on physical autonomy, how technology affects society, oppression, personhood, addiction. Like, to say that there's scientific rigor in there is kind of whack considering the just insanity of everything that goes on in there. Some of it is surprisingly accurate, but I still don't feel like claiming it under hard science fiction or whatever is correct at all. But it seems more ridiculous to even argue about this to begin with in regards to our stupid little nerd books. Another complaint I have is that the 2 and only 2 books that were listed to illustrate the state of contemporary science fiction were The Power and Handmaid's Tale, and they feel like such weird, specific picks. First sub-complaint, 2 books, 30 years apart, really? That's the breadth of the entire genre over that period of time? And neither were ever on the Hugos, by the way, just throwing that out there. Also, Margaret Thatcher never claimed it to be science fiction. Nobody did. She specifically says it is speculative fiction. It is very comfortably alternative history. It is not trying to claim to be science fiction. However, the power absolutely is. Half of that book practically reads like a research paper on the weird electric producing organ that half of the human race gets because of pollutants. That sure sounds science fiction to me. And secondly, the 2 books picked are books by women that specifically focus on gender shit. I mean, it's kind of convenient to just ignore that post-Golden Age, we've gotten books like the Zones of Thought books, Ancillary Justice, the Expanse books, Murderbot, The Old Man's War, the Culture series, everything Becky Chambers has done, everything Joanna Russ has done, everything James Chiptree has done, the Children of Time series, Hyperion Cantos, Light from Uncommon Stars, everything Alastair Reynolds has done, everything Octavia Butler has done, Blindside by Peter Watts, Ted Chiang's works. I could keep going, but you get the idea. The sheer quantity of work and its vastness that we've gotten is truly remarkable, and it's very easy to paint a narrative by just pick and choosing like that. I mean, I could pick, Ted Chiang and Ken Liu and be like, oh man, I'm kind of insinuating that there's too many Asian people writing science fiction. That'd be kind of weird. Be weird. The point that I'm making here is that it is very easy to go down these slippery slopes and build harmful narratives just because something is not science-y enough. Making broad statements on picking 2 books out of contemporary science fiction and claiming this is what contemporary science fiction is dangerous. This is gatekeeping. And like all gatekeeping, it can spiral into legitimate discrimination against groups of people, which is ironic because ultimately science fiction is kind of against that. Unless you count some of the Golden Age stuff, and then, up for debate. The very aggressive and pointed thumbnail, combined with the statement,
are we witnessing an evolution in the genre, or is the essence of sci-fi being diluted in favour of broader, more accessible themes?
And literally only picking examples of contemporary science fiction by women, that doesn't look good. The insinuation that these cherry-picked books that have harrowing and detailed examinations of racial and gendered violence, oppression, sexism, you name it, is somehow diluting the genre and part of broader and more accessible themes doesn't look good, man. They sure don't seem very broad and accessible if people are complaining about them, especially the people that are showing up in the comments of this video. Very clearly, I'm not the only one who's picking up on these sexist undertones. And I really do think that there needs to be some kind of deeper examination of the message that's being put forth in this video if comments like this are showing up. Except this fucking weirdo seems to think it's a good thing.
Somebody started off the discussion by saying that they were incredibly bored by my reading and they wished I hadn't done it or something like that. I wasn't what, so you say, okay, what do you say? That is what, being a writer means you have to risk that, and being a writer who writes something that is not exactly what people are expecting, you have to risk that.
Remember how I said we'd come back to that Sam Delaney story about some weirdo giving a speech at his Nebula win? To continue, the man who'd made the speech had apparently not actually yet read my novel when he wrote his talk. He had merely had it described to him by a friend, a notoriously eccentric reader, who had fulminated that the work was clearly and obviously beneath consideration as a serious science fiction novel. Each chapter began with a set of quotes from literary texts that had nothing to do with science at all. Our naysayer had gone along with this evaluation at least as far as putting together his rhubarbative speech. When, a week or two later, he decided to read the book for himself, in case he was challenged on specifics, he found, to his surprise, he liked it. And from what embarrassment I can only guess, became one of my staunchest and most articulate supporters as an editor and a critic. Now, I know there are people out there who look at a thing and decide it's bad and stupid and get angry without actually engaging with it. I do this too sometimes. It's not okay. But we need to acknowledge that sometimes we are not in the best place to be articulate and level-headed about why we're not vibing with something. I am acutely aware of what it's like to feel alienated from something that you love. Perhaps this thing might be the only good thing in your life. Maybe you're having a really just dog shit time of it. I've had a lot of those. In fact, some might say I'm having one of those times right now. It is so unbelievably easy to just wanna lash out and focus on some narrow, easy target that you can just pin your issues and your problems on, instead of making the hard, tough, and challenging decisions to look inward or in the less easy avenues in order to find what might actually be making you feel like a giant pile of dog shit. And don't get me wrong here, I love a good lashing out, but in a healthy, constructive way, like at big mega corporations who literally don't give a shit about us, instead of women and minorities who are literally just trying to exist. However, it's okay if those women and minorities are also doing a big mega corporation that doesn't actually care about us. Then it cancels out. Then it's fine. I think one of the arguments that I hate the most that people make is when somebody reads a book from the Golden Age, a Heinlein, and they don't like it. There's always, of course, the response of, oh, you need to read all of these in order to fully appreciate what he's doing. And I really, really hate that argument, because for a lot of people, these books have not aged well. And some people who are so deep into this genre simply cannot see that despite being important pieces of work, there are some aspects, particularly involving sex and race, that will come off the wrong way to some people. There's a really excellent review of Moon is the Harsh Mistress by a person who is not really in the sci-fi genre, but is a big reader and makes some really, really excellent observations, which I rarely see people make, about Heinlein's shallow gender and sex dynamics and his extremely creepy descriptions of young women. And by young, I mean underage. I feel like it's pretty fair that a lot of people would be weirded out reading the sentence of him articulating the death of a child bride, describing her underaged boobies. It's kind of really fucking weird. And again, I'm not doing a cancel culture. I'm just saying this is what things were like at the time. This is how things were, and this, to people, is how they still interpret them. There is no amount of extra context that you can possibly give. There is no amount of praising Heinlein's genius that is going to make some people overlook the incredibly fucking weird nature of some stuff in these books. Science fiction is very much something that we all love, and we are all passionate about, and we all want people to be able to engage with and see the love and joy that we do. But doing dumb gatekeeping like this, making these arbitrary distinctions, only serves to stratify and divide the genre even more and bury authors and works and potentially newcomers to the genre under the guise of completely meaningless nerd superiority. Oftentimes this opposition, this alienation that we feel has been drilled into by malicious forces that do not have our best interests at heart here. Engaging with these things, actually looking at them, thinking about yourself and how they relate to you, how they relate to the world. That is what I love about this newer generation of science fiction. They have taken the amazing, really interesting, cool science stuff that a lot of the golden age sci-fi authors tried to do, and were able to take these concepts and expand them and build upon them in ways that feel so much more grounded and relatable to the way that we live our lives today. It feels like there's real people, it feels like there's real conflicts that are being examined here with just a bunch of really sick sci-fi stuff involved. In my opinion, you don't need a million bajillion science words in order to get that across. Suck my dick, Andy Wier, you write Sarah J. Maas books for men. In my opinion, this is a genre that has only expanded and grown and beautified and complexified as we have gone, where it has taken things from various other types of work, literary fields and subgenres, and combined and meshed and merged and evolved into something that, quite frankly, the Golden Age people were far too focused on the scientific bullshit to realize the true importance that their work could tackle here. As Ursula K. Le Guin said, science fiction is about the now. It's about the present. It's about examining things that we are dealing with in these fantastical, futuristic scenarios. And that's amazing. It's fascinating. It's helped my dumbass understand and interact with and engage with God knows how many concepts that my dumb little brain might not have been able to do anyways. And the fact that we've reached a point where there's such an amazing, diverse group of authors that are contributing from all over the world, bringing in their own unique cultural perspectives and life experiences, bringing in their own identities, sexualities, genders, races, and interweaving that in very real concepts for how we as a reader, and me as a disgustingly white guy, can engage with and empathize with in a really, really one-of-a-kind way. If people really want to play gatekeeper and say that the essence of science fiction is intrinsically tied to those white, colonialist, sexist views that the genre was founded on, then you know what, man? Maybe we are losing the essence of science fiction. And that's a good thing, because it sounds like that essence of science fiction that focuses on the science and the exclusion versus the humanity and the inclusion, the other one sounds like much better of a deal. And I would take that literally any day over 8 pages of talking about some annoying detail that nobody actually gives a shit about. Fuck you, Andy Wier. This one is Jim. The one in the other video was John, but they both have one eye. Mr. Butthole, you want lappies? You want lappies?